Welcome to Podula Rasa. I'm David Blank.
And I'm Jim Esch.
This is a podcast about finding something in nothing.
In this show, we'd like to follow up on the theme from our first show, which was all about bright, shiny things. We solicited some feedback from our audience, and we got a couple of our friends to join in, and we interviewed them for this one to see how they understood the bright, shiny things theme and where they see that in their own lives. You'll hear from Kevin, a friend of ours from high school, and Ken, who is a poet and a teaching colleague of mine.
This is Kevin. He's a friend of Jim and mine. What I wanted to ask him was, when you first listened to the show, how much how much did you love it?
I think it's a great concept. I do. Certainly the world could use some positivity right now, right? And that's, I think, if I understood the reason for the podcast in the first place, it was to sort of come up with some positive random thoughts on life, I guess, as opposed to all the thrashing and trashing that usually goes on the internet. So I think it's a great concept.
Did it make you think about anything that surprised you?
Well, it's kind of subjective because it was two of my friends from high school, right? So Jim's radio voice surprised me because he didn't sound like himself. I don't know who that person was talking about the podcast and what it was going to do. I was like, okay, I guess Dave met somebody else named Jim out there, and I'm sure I had no idea it was him.
I guess what I'm getting at is kind of like when you mentioned what you said to me about when you were listening to Jim's segment, the question that you had, and I thought
about the rabbits.
Yeah. So is that the first thing that popped into your head about?
Yeah. When he was telling that story, I was waiting for a play-by-play, and that was a complete disappointment.
Once and for all, settling the debate.
Yeah.
About fucking like rabbits. Classic.
I mean, he might have watched them and said, wow, they are really crap at this. Who came up with this expression?
Finally, somebody asked the right question.
We're talking with my friend Ken here. Ken, did you get a chance to listen to Podula Rasa?
I liked it a lot. I found it very interesting. Once I started listening, I just wanted to stay connected. I also like that it's not super duper long.
Yes.
You know, I mean, if we're going to think about bright and shiny things, and I think something that's a little shorter and more focused stays with people more.
Here's what I was thinking the whole time I was listening to it.
Okay.
I was thinking, if I was involved, like if it was the three of us, I would be like the foil to you guys, basically. Like I would be making fun of stuff and like being contra just to be that way, probably. That was going through my head. I was thinking, like, I don't know if I could be involved in this because I think I'm going to take them down I'm going to go low when everybody else is going high.
That's okay though. That's good. That's good. Some of the best things are really conflicted in their essence. You know, think about an atom. It's got a proton and protons, neutrons, and electrons, and the electrons is like the complete opposite charge-wise of a proton, yet they still stick together, and they generate something really good in the universe, matter, which we kind of rely on to live. That's interesting. So, maybe one day we'll get together, do a podcast, and make an atom.
That would be
I think
cool.
that'd be pretty cool.
That would be very cool.
We'll have to decide who's going to be the neutron. It's like who's gonna be George in the band, I always wanted to be Paul.
Hey, George was awesome.
He was awesome.
So the first show, as you know, was about this concept of bright, shiny things, which comes from this quote from the musician John Hassel, right? And he said that these bright, shiny things catch his attention, and then he tries to maximize the time he spends there or develops more bright and shiny things. So it's kind of, I guess, his musical artistic approach. So I was wondering what this whole notion of bright, shiny things means to you. Like, how do you interpret that? Is it something you apply to your own poetic practice, or is there another way you construe that idea?
I think for me, maybe it has to do with the word alertness. And when things present themselves to you, maybe quite unexpectedly, notice them. Don't just turn away and think, I'm busy, I've got other things I need to do. But sometimes in those small moments, something very telling can happen. Something that can be very, not just make your day better, but kind of stay with your spirit a little bit. And I think of the bright and shiny as the thing that, in our normal gray darkness, something that really leaps out. And you want to look at it. You want to be alert to it. You want to enjoy the surprise, in that way. So I think for me, that's what that means. And if I could just tie that to my creative process a little bit, I rarely sit down to write a poem knowing where it's going to go. They do, once you start going, they kind of get lives of their own, and you kind of follow the bright and shiny trail, so to speak, and you may not know where it's going to lead, and sometimes it doesn't end up in a very bright and shiny place.
The bright, shiny thing goes into a deep, dark hole.
Well, we call that the delete key. I've had a lot of that. But to get to the thing that may be bright and shiny and may have more of a chance to endure, maybe you got to go down a lot of those trails that don't lead to where you might have hoped that they're going to lead. But eventually, I still kind of think, in general, something good comes out of writing. You may not know what it is, but it will happen. And there'll be that moment where you see something with more acuteness, something with a little bit more clarity that you hadn't have seen before.
Do you have any examples of, like, maybe a poem that that would sort of illustrate what you were just talking about?
Well, asking me if do I have a poem, it's like, yeah, I've only got like Imelda Marcos with the 3,000 pair of shoes. Oh yeah, I got a poem. I certainly do. This is from a book that you were my publisher for, and your wife Stacy provided the artwork for. It's just an absolutely gorgeous book called When the Light Turns Green. And there's a poem in here about a little lake we like to visit and walk by in Wisconsin. And if you're talking about the bright, shiny thing, that moment of when you're away from a lot of, quote, civilization, and you're out in nature, and nature is kind of present not just in your eyes, but in your spirit as well. And maybe the poem is a meditation on one of those moments. I'll just read it. It's called Star Lake, Sainer, Wisconsin. 20 years and we can't keep a clean house, can't agree on how to store dishes. What we do well is walk among lakes. Few boats, few homes on the shore. Loons love it as we do. When we find a clearing, we look the lake directly in its blue eyes. A heron swoops overhead, lapping water rubs a bay's edge. Spring flowers give way to mullens and fireweeds. Our beards, whiter than last year. That poem is kind of, you'd think it starts out as just like kind of almost a quote nature poem. I hate when people have these categories quite like that,
Right.
as if a poem can ever be kind of nailed down into one of those categories. But the poem, at the end of it, becomes kind of a meditation on age and change, which, as I am growing older, becomes a subject more and more present in my work as well. But if we take that poem and go to the bright and shiny, it's like you have to get away from the normal road to be able to have the moment with the loons. You have to be out seeing the lake, not just imagining it or thinking it, but letting the lake kind of provide you with the beauty that's there and the spiritual regeneration, which if you just kind of open your eyes a little bit, you can maybe have access to it that way too.
Yeah, I've been missing going out into nature. I mean, we've been staying at home with the COVID crisis. We don't quite feel comfortable enough to go too far away. And I'm really feeling the lack of that, getting in touch with that world. I miss it terribly.
Oh, I do too. I guess I'm lucky in one way because I'm so connected with my garden, and so at least on days where it's not, super rainy or whatever, I'm out there every day, and that at least makes me feel locally that I've got that kind of connection.
Right.
But normally, early June is when Stanley and I would be going up to the North Woods, and we'd be seeing the things that I just read about in the poem. And that, because of COVID, that's out this year. We're not going to go. And that's a loss,
Yeah.
I feel like I've done this every year since I was 5 years old. And to have that taken out of my life, I feel that fairly intensely.
Right.
What are some of the bright, shiny things in your life?
Yeah. So
First thing.
that was the tough one. So, I did think about that because that was basically what the entire episode was about. So then I started thinking, gosh, why am I having such a difficult time finding a bright, shiny spot? I mean, you caught me at kind of a weird time, while we settled and moved into this house in Drexel Hill, and we still are fixing up the house and media to put it up on the market. So we're kind of stressed out with that. I haven't been open to bright, shiny spots. I usually do find them in the weirdest things. Like this is like a month ago now, but a woman that I work with, she was pregnant when we all had to start working from home, and then she had her kid, and we found out she had this baby boy and blah 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 blah. And I was just like, you know what, the world's still spinning. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's basically what Jim was trying to say with the rabbits. There's so much crap going on right now, but the rabbits don't care. It's spring. They're Twitter pated. They're going to go bang it out in some alley and make a whole bunch more rabbits, and COVID virus and, the economy and Trump be damned.
you want to read your other poem?
Oh, I did. Yeah, I had another one from the same book. One of my favorite flowers, and it's not blooming yet, but it's about to go into bloom, is called meadow rue. You can see them out in, kind of fields, and they can even grow in local gardens. Like we have several of them here in our own garden. But this is also a short poem from When the Light Turns Green, and when the meadow rue blooms, for me, it's one of the great moments of the spring. Meadow rue. I think of my grandmother's white hair when I see how full it is, charming, nothing else quite so eye-catching, and no way to stop August from coming.
Ken Pobo is the author of many, many poetry books. Some of the recent ones include Lop Lop in a Red City, published by Circling Rivers in 2017, and Gingy, Expecting Snow, published by Duck Lake Books in 2019. Thanks for listening to Padula Rasa Podcast. You can visit our website, padularasa.com. All the shows are going to be listed at that website, and you will also find links to the podcast at Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Spotify. So if you'd like to subscribe, now you can do it. We hope you'll provide some feedback too. So if you go to the website, click on a show title, listen to the show, and drop a comment in the comment box. Padula Rasa is produced by Dave Blank and Jim Esch. Show number 2 was produced in May of 2020. Thanks again for listening.